Hey guys, welcome back to DCS, and welcome back to the DCS MiG-15bis guys. So I hope that you guys enjoyed the previous video with that little bit of an introduction, history, background about the MiG-15bis. So today we're going to do an engine startup, a cold engine startup on the MiG-15bis. Now, for those of you who are exclusively Hornet fans on my channel, don't worry guys, Hornet videos are coming. Hornet videos will always be on either Thursdays or Fridays, and the reason for that is that the DCS open beta, Eagle Dynamics every time updates the open beta on Wednesdays, so I want to get the latest update before I do a video. So Hornet videos on Thursdays or Fridays all the time. For the rest of us, let's get into the startup of the MiG-15bis. So as I said, today is going to be just a startup, a cold startup. The next video will be radio, taxi, and takeoff, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so let's get into the startup. So the first thing that you want to do in the startup, this is going to be basically a full startup. This is going to be pre-startup, startup, engine checks, hydraulic checks, everything. Okay, so it's going to be the full thing. So let's go ahead, and the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that the battery switch is in the off position in the circuit breaker here, and you want to turn on the generator. So generator is on. I'm going to contact the ground crew. We're going to ask for ground electrical power to be turned on. Excellent, so the ground power is now on. Now there's two ways to check that if ground power is connected to your aircraft or not. One is with these lights here. You saw that these lights come on immediately, so that means that there's power in the aircraft. And also you want to come down here to this volt/amp meter, and you want to press this button. It says V, and then from the top orange scale you can read the volts on the aircraft, and you don't want it to be anything less than 24 volts. Excellent, so we can see it's above 25 volts as well. So that's all good. Next, we're going to come down here to this circuit breaker panel to the right, and you want to turn on the radio, artificial horizon, trimmer, the Arc 5. Now I'm gonna go ahead and explain the rest of this stuff here as well. So this is your battery switch. This is the circuit breaker for the landing lights, so you gotta turn this on, and then you can turn on the landing gear or the landing light switch using this switch right there. You want to turn this on as well. I forgot this. You want to turn on the RV2 as well, which is the radar altimeter. This circuit breaker is to do with the emergency jettisoning of tanks and bombs. This is to do with the bombs. The 23mm cannon, the 37mm, the ASP gun sight, and down here, which is very difficult to see, is the S13 camera. Okay, so initially we want just these six, including the generator 6 circuit breakers to be turned on. Okay, now we're going to do the checks of the various different things that we started here on this panel. So for example, radio, but the radio I will do next in the next video because it's a little bit complicated. But let's check the trimmer, for example, and we can see here the elevated trim tab. This light is on. This white light turns on every time the elevated trim is in the neutral position, so we can see that's on. Let's check the radar altimeter, for example. Okay, we turn it on. You can see it's on. Okay, and then you've got the two different bands as well. So for example, from 0 to 120 meters, or from 0 to 1,200 meters. So we can see that's on. What else can we check? Artificial horizon. We can do the checks for that as well. And then the next is the Arc 5. So let's turn on the Arc 5. Now we should, as soon as I turn this on, we should hear static in the radio. There we go. So the Arc 5 works. Now obviously guys, these checks only apply to real world stuff. Here we are, we're in a simulation. Of course everything's gonna work unless you program the in the mission editor for failures to happen. but otherwise everything is going to work. You don't really need to do these checks. So now we know these stuff works. Now we're going to go ahead and turn on the oxygen system. So you're going to come down here to this this valve, and you're going to rotate this valve counterclockwise all the way open. Now we have oxygen coming into the aircraft whenever we need it. So the oxygen system is only supposed to supply you with oxygen once you pass an elevation of 2,000 meters, okay? I think it's about 6,000 feet. So next, in the manual it says to turn on this dilution valve as well, but if you turn it on, you begin to receive oxygen immediately. So you see this flashing? You don't really need that. You don't need to waste oxygen right now on the ground. So I don't know if the manual's got it wrong or what's going on there. I normally leave this off. Okay? Oxygen will begin to blink. This blinker will begin to start once you pass 2,000 meters. Next is the emergency tap. So if you turn this on, turn it counterclockwise, you can see this blinker is on permanently. That means we're constantly receiving oxygen, emergency oxygen. And if you come down here to this oxygen gauge, you will see it dropping. Okay, so we're wasting oxygen at the moment. But that means that the emergency oxygen system does work. Okay, so we'll turn it back off. We have the diluter off as well. So now the oxygen system works as well. We check that. Now we come down to the left circuit breaker, left panel, side panel circuit breaker. Now this switch right here is the air start switch. So if your engine cuts out mid-flight in the air and you want to restart it, you want to flip this onto the on, and the engine will restart. We'll have a look at that once we get into the emergencies of the aircraft. But this is the air restart switch, and if you turn this switch on, this light will come on letting you know that this switch is on, because after your engine has restarted you have to turn it off. So that's this light here to remind you that this is in the on position. Next, this is the engine ignition button, engine instrument button, second pump, engine second tank pump signal, and then we have the booster pumps. Okay, so we're going to turn this on first, the engine instruments, and once we turn that on, two lights come on. One, the generator off light comes on. Next, the engine start prohibition light comes on. So once this is on, you cannot start the engine. Now the reason for why this is on is that the aircraft system is detecting that the booster pumps, the engine's fuel booster pumps are off. So as soon as we turn on the booster pumps, this engine start inhibition light goes off. So you can't start the engine if this light is on. That means that the booster pumps are off. So next, we're going to turn on the engine ignition switch on, booster pumps, and the second pump. We're going to leave the isolation valve off. Okay, it's very important not to turn this on. I'll explain this in this video later on when we do some checks, and I'll explain what it is. So these three circuit breakers on, and we come down here and we can see that the inhibition light is off because the fuel pump is working, the booster pumps are working. So now we're ready for engine startup, basically. So we're going to come down here and we're going to check two last things. One, that the throttle is all the way back. It has to be all the way back. You cannot have it in idle or anything like that. All the way back. And then we come down here to the side. I'm not sure if you guys can see this. I'll zoom in as much as I can. You see this lever? This is the engine fuel shutoff lever. So and it has to be all the way on the top. You see it says closed. It has to be all the way up here. Make sure it's all the way up here. Okay? It can't be down the bottom. It cannot be open even slightly. It has to be closed all the way. So it's in the up closed position. Next, we're going to open the cover for the engine start button. Now, I'm going to try to explain this to the best of my ability. What I'm going to do now. The best thing to do is that once you press this button, you have to hold it for 1 to 2 seconds. Okay, not less than 1 second. You'll hear the engine cranking. Once you hear the engine cranking, the manual says that once the engine RPMs get to about 600, you want to move this fuel shutoff valve to about halfway down, so halfway open. And then once the engine RPMs reaches about 1200, you want to open it all the way. Now this is a bit tricky to get, okay? The way that I do it is that I listen for the engine. You can hear the engine humming, okay? As the engine humming increases, you want to slowly open that the fuel shutoff valve, okay? Until the fuel shutoff valve is all the way open and the engine is running nice and stable. If you open this fuel shutoff valve too quickly or too far down, you will choke the engine. The engine will turn off, it will stall. It won't turn on at all. Okay, so let's get started. So we press the button. There we go. You can see, you can hear that engine starting. So I'm going to slowly move this down. I can hear the engine. See? There we go. And all the way open. Perfect. And also we're going to watch for EGT. We're going to make sure it doesn't spike more than 650 degrees. Excellent. There we go. That's perfect. Now idling engine speed should be about 2,500 to 2,600. So it's give or take depending on your field elevation. So that's awesome. Now we're going to close the engine start button cover. Okay. Now we're going to do, as I said, you need to watch for the EGT, the exhaust gas temperature, not to rise more than 650 degrees when you're doing a startup. Next we're going to check the instruments here, the oil pressure, fuel pressure, and oil temperature. Now in the Western aircraft it's usually green versus red, so the red area is the bad area, the green area is the good area. Now it's blue or red, so you want everything to be in the blue, and we can see that it is. Now for idle, the engine oil pressure should be 0.2 kilograms per square centimeter. We can see that it is. The fuel pressure should not be more than 12 kilograms per square centimeter. We can see that it's perfect. And the oil temperature is perfect as well with 45 degrees. Okay, so that's all good. Now now basically the engine is running, it's idling nice and perfect. We're going to increase the engine RPMs slightly above 4,500 RPM, so right about here. Now as soon as it crosses 4,500, this light should go off. Keep your eye on this generator light. There we go, it turned off. Now obviously, as I said, it depends on your field elevation as well, depending on how high the airfield elevation is where you're doing your startup. So we're going to hold it right there. There we go, so the generator light is off. Next we're going to contact the ground crew, and we're going to ask them to turn off the electrical power. Now as soon as the electrical power is off, we're going to turn on the battery here. Excellent. So we now turn on the battery. Now guys, this is the end of the startup. Okay, so you've started up the aircraft, everything's all good, it's good to go. Now from now on I'm just going to do some extra checks. So this is part of the normal MiG-15 in real life engine checks and stuff like that. You don't really need to do this within DCS, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to show you guys. And again, when we're here playing a simulation like this, we are role-playing, are we not? We're kind of role-playing as pilots, so I actually like this extra bit of work that I'm doing, because it makes it more immersive, I guess. Anyhow, so we're going to ask the ground crew to place wheel chocks. Excellent, so the wheel chocks are in place, and we're going to increase engine throttle all the way, engine RPM all the way to 7,000. The aircraft begins to move at about 6,000, begins to roll. There we go. I'm going to keep it at 7,000. Now we begin our engine checks. So, we come to the isolation valve. So this is the thing that I promised that I will explain. So what is this isolation valve? So, to what I understand about this thing is that the engine needs a different mixture of fuel to air ratio at varying different altitudes, okay? There is a automatic regulator it's a barometric regulator. So based on your altitude, your current aircraft altitude will vary the amount of fuel to air ratio, okay? Instead of the normal, just standard air to fuel ratio. Now this isolation valve, when you turn this on, it turns off that automatic system in case of it malfunctioning, okay? So when you turn this on, it turns off that automatic system. Now when you flip this switch on, this green light will come on, letting you know that you have turned on the isolation valve to turn off that automatic regulator. Now we want to do a check, so we want to hold the engine RPM at about 7,000 RPM, and we want to turn this on, and the engine RPMs should not vary, either increase or decrease by more than 250 RPM, okay? And the EGT can increase or decrease by 10 to 15 degrees as well. So you want to look for that. So we'll turn it on. And there we go. We saw a slight increase in the engine RPM as well as the EGT. So I'll do it again. We'll turn it off. And it should come back down if you turn it off. And we can see it did. So we'll do it again. You can see ever so slightly the engine RPM increasing. So that's good. If it doesn't do anything, that means that there's a problem with the engine. So that's all good. Next, we want to bring down the engine RPM to about 5,000 RPM. Come on. There we go. Now the engine does have a bit of a lag, guys. And if you watch my previous video on the introduction and the background, this engine is actually quite new. This jet engine is actually it isn't a perfected jet engine. The VK1 Klimov engine. So there is a bit of a lag when you move the throttle. So we're at 5,000 RPM now. So this check requires us to smoothly increase the throttle. Now you don't want the throttle movement to be jerky, or you don't want it to be too sudden. You want it to be smooth and slow. We want to move the throttle all the way from 5,000 all the way to maximum. And it has to be done within basically the engine, after you move the throttle all the way forward, the engine has to get to about 11,500 RPM in about 14 seconds. So let's go. Smoothly moving the engine throttles up. There we go. And we should watch the EGT as well. There we go. So if you counted that, that should be around 14 seconds. It shouldn't take longer than 14 seconds to reach here. And also you saw that the EGT spiking. It shouldn't spike more than 770 degrees Celsius. Okay, so this orange part right here. So now we look at our instruments. Our EGT shouldn't be more than 650 degrees, which it isn't. It's perfect. Next, the oil pressure, it's in the blue. The fuel pressure, it's in the blue. Oil temperature is in the blue as well. Okay, so that's all good. Next, we're going to come back here and we're going to do another engine isolation valve test. So this time we want to turn it on, and the engine RPM and EGT should stay about the same, or increase or decrease by 50 RPMs, or just slightly on EGT. Okay, so we want it to remain the same or change ever so slightly. So let's turn it on. There we go. Perfect. So that's off. Next, we want to bring the engine RPMs smoothly. So we're decreasing the throttle smoothly back down to idle. And it should idle at about 2,500 RPM, give or take, plus 100, minus 100. And you can see that generator off light came back on as soon as we went below 4,000 RPM. There we go. So we're sitting at about 2,800 RPM. Now we want to check our engine instruments again. So we don't want the EGT to be anything above 510 degrees, which is perfect. And our other instruments here, so everything is in the green. Yep, or I should say blue. Everything is fine, so it's all good now. Everything is in the green. Okay, so that's about it for the engine checks. Next, we're going to do a hydraulic check. So we're going to move the engine RPMs back up to about 8,000. There we go, just hold it at about 8,000. There we go, so that's 8,000 right there. Okay, so we want the flaps to be in the neutral position, the flap handle, which is this handle here, in the neutral position. Now in the next video, when we do the actual taxi and takeoff, I will explain more about the flap system. Don't worry about that. It's a little bit complicated. It's a bit of a odd, clumsy, bit user unfriendly system, so I'll explain that in detail later on. But for now, we just want the flap handle to be neutral, and then we want to come down here and we want to see a hydraulic pressure between 80 to about 140 kilograms per square centimeter, and we can see that we're there. We're in that range. Perfect. Now we want to drop the flaps down to 20 degrees. So if I show you guys, maximum landing flaps is 55 degrees. Takeoff flaps is 20 degrees. Okay, so we want to drop it down to 20, and you can see this red barber pole here, just this one, not this one. This one here coming up slightly. So if I go down to the 55 degrees, there we go, and you can see it on the shadow down here as well. Okay, let's move it back up to the 20. You can see it on the shadow as well. How cool is that? So that's all the way up. This is a mechanical indicator for your flap position in case you don't know where your flaps are at. So we'll move it back down to 20 degrees. And there we go. And you want to always have the flap handle in the neutral position. Now, this mechanical pole, or this barber pole, what they normally call it a barber pole. So this one is for your flaps. This one and this one only. This one here, this barber pole here, as well as the one, where is it? There we go. Here on the nose and on the right wing as well. These are for your landing gears. Okay, so this is for the right landing gear, nose gear, as well as the left main landing gear. So when these are up, your landing gear is down. Okay, down and locked. And when they go down, that means that the landing gear is up and locked. And also you have these lights here as well. So one final check is the air brake check. So as I said, we have two buttons. In the previous video I explained that to you guys. We have two buttons. We have a toggle button for the air brake here, and then we have a permanent on and off button here. So we're going to deploy the air brakes using the toggle button on the stick, and this light should come up. That indicates that the air brake is on, and if we release, that should turn off. Means that the air brake has been retracted. Now normally we would have a crew chief here giving us a thumbs up with the air brakes and everything. So we'll do it again. It should light, and it should turn off. Okay, now we're going to turn on this switch here, which holds the air brake for us, so we don't have to constantly hold this button. And again, the light should come up. We'll turn on. And we will close it. So the air brake should retract. There we go. And let's bring the throttles down to about 5,000. Now the aircraft, as I said, begins to roll at about 6,000. without wheel chocks. Obviously, we have wheel chocks on at the moment. Well, guys, that's about it. That is a full engine startup from cold, and the engine checks as well as the hydraulic checks. That's about it for the engine startup. Thank you so much for watching. As I said, the next video will be radio, taxi, and takeoff, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.